And it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest. We have Jane Blain Gilberston, who probably doesn't need much of an introduction in Janesville, but for those of you who might not know, she is the president and CEO of Blain's Farm and Fleet, a regional chain of 43 stores in Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, and Michigan. Of course, Blain's has been designated an essential business, so Jane's fleet of stores have been operating, and of course, we're anxious to hear about lessons learned. We also have Kristine Hillmer. She's the president and CEO of the Wisconsin Restaurant Association, actually one of the largest trade associations in the state, with over 7,000 member locations throughout Wisconsin. Some of you may not be familiar with WRA, so I'm just going to add that the mission of the WRA is dedicated to the success of the food service and hospitality industry. The association advocates on behalf of the restaurant industry, provides a voice for the restaurant industry to consumers and the media, and provides access to information and services to help members better run their businesses. Members include fine dining establishments, mom and pop supper clubs, small cafes, quick service restaurants, corporate chain restaurants, institutional food service operations, catering businesses, and hotel and motel food service, among others. So we'd like to welcome both Kristine and Jane as our guests. We will also hear from Dan Cunningham, of course, former Janesville's Vice President of Government Affairs, and he's going to share some thoughts on what you may have heard about as of yesterday, the Better Together platform that we announced. I won't go into it at this point, other than to tell you that it's an important initiative on our organization, and I hope you'll hang in there and listen to what Dan has to say. This presentation is off the record in case anybody from the press is listening in. We also want to encourage all of the listeners, if you represent businesses, please look for our survey about personal protective equipment. This is an area where we think we can add some value to your membership, helping you understand what your needs are and will be, and where you might source the PPE that you need when time comes to perhaps reopen your business. So with that, I'm going to turn to Jane Blain Gilberston first. And Jane, if you would spend a few minutes and tell us about the experiences and the lessons learned from running a retail business during this pandemic. Jane?
Thank you, John. And just first off, thanks for having me, and hope that all of you and your loved ones and friends are safe out there. Crazy times, that's probably the biggest understatement in the world. So I just tallied up, this is day 51 for us, who's counting. And when I say for us, March 9th was the first day we started holding daily COVID-19 meetings in our organization. At that time, admittedly, it was focused around supply chain. We were more focused on the impacts in Asia, and at that point, somewhat in Europe, but mostly Asia, and on our product flow and supply chain. Quickly, that turned within literally 2 days to disinfecting procedures and what our protocols would be for stepping up our disinfecting and cleaning in what had been our normal course of things in our stores, and just rapidly accelerated through many, many different aspects and levels as we all became more aware and more guidance came out from the CDC, and we started to get some guidance from the various states that we operate in. And so it's been a moving target for all of us. I have said this many times, but I will say it again. Literally wake up every day and just fortunate to be open, and feel terrible for those who are not. It's not been a picnic being open, but we still get an opportunity to try to do what we do. And so hopefully by sharing some of the things we've learned, we've been through, we can be of some help to those of you who haven't had the opportunity to be running your businesses, or at least not in full capacity. And so my hope is that any of this is helpful to you. Certainly us running larger format retail stores and a distribution center, e-com BOPUS, which is Buy Online, Pick Up in Store, a lot of different aspects that may or may not relate to some of you on the call. I certainly am not an expert, don't want to pretend to tell you how to do your business. I just hope that anything that we have learned might be helpful to you. So, and I'm happy to answer questions during the call or even afterwards. So just by way of background, we're a member of RELA, which is the Retail Industry Leaders Association. This is where the majority of large retail across the country has membership, and they started doing calls with CEOs twice a week, probably about 4.5 weeks ago. So I've had the luxury of being on an hour call twice a week with CEOs of the largest retail organizations across the country. And early on, it was just, it was obvious that there were those that were essential, like us, who were open, and others who had already been closed down or were being closed down at that point. And so we share across all groups what's going on with CARES Act, whatever it may be, whatever insights might be coming from the government, and then also then began the last 2 weeks breaking out into subsets of those of us who are open and are closed. I mention that because those of us who are open in essential type of categories started sharing as much information as we could to create a library for RELA. So that, frankly, we can learn from one another. What are you doing? Have you tried this? Have you run into this? What are the government officials telling you? What are your associates telling you? But also to provide a library for those who are not open yet, so that they would have a quicker start, frankly, from our learnings. So kind of a unique environment, if you can imagine. It's pretty competitive people trying to be careful not to cross the lines of antitrust, but doing it from the point of view of what's best for our customers and what's best for our associates and how can we learn. We quickly came to kind of 2 points of view, which maybe will help explain, how I think about this. We as retailers are trying to establish specific guidelines or rules that could help individual states make better decisions about how to guide retail specifically. We have been, and this is what I'm happy that I'm only in 4 states, honest to God, because people that are across the country are dealing with so many different variations of different executive orders, not just following what the governor has said, but then, of course, any municipality who decides to take a different slant on it. So it's been a real challenge, particularly for those larger folks, but hardy challenge for us. Michigan is different than Wisconsin. It's different than Illinois. It's different than Iowa. So we thought, all right, rather than just being, frankly, whipsawed, we will try to come up with a point of view for those of us who've been open and saying, we look at this from a point of safety for our associates, safety for our customers first and foremost. And these are the things we've been doing, trying to follow the guidelines of the CDC and to the best interests of how we all have to try to do business somehow, and share that formally back with each of the 50 states. So RELA has paired up with NRF, which is the other large retail organization, National Retail Federation. They pooled their resources and shared this information with each of the states, trying to help the governors govern in a more consistent way and not put, for instance, our associates in the position of playing policemen in stores. In particular, no one wants to put anybody in that position. So one, try to help establish some guidelines that might actually help those governing, and 2, which I think is really important for all of us, is to help educate our customers as to what to expect when they walk into any retail or in the future more restaurants, what to expect. How can we band together and make our customers feel more comfortable that they can do this as safely as possible and that we could do it more uniformly. So they shouldn't have to worry, when I go to Farm and Fleet, I got to do this. When I go to this place, I have to do this. Trying to get a general sense that we think will present more opportunity for confidence in our consumers. We think that is part of our responsibility, and if we do that together, hopefully customers start to get more comfortable with what to expect when they're out there. So that's kind of the guiding principle that we've been working with, and how we've been approaching things even with our own stores. How do we get our own associates comfortable with the changing environment? So anyways, we've gone through a lot of different versions and iterations, as many of you have seen out there, and many of you may have gone through already yourself, everything from, again, early on just disinfecting and those basic creating cleaning lists and times and very specific protocols of how we're going to continue to keep our stores disinfected, to the run on paper goods and toilet paper and all those craziness things that were going on, and how to manage that and where to put limits and how to try to manage customers' expectations in that regard. Then products shifted to things like hand sanitizer and gloves, and and the need, and certainly for us, one of the main reasons we're essential is because we support the ag industry. So early on, what we called pantry loading, huge rush on business for ag feeds, pet foods, anything supporting the ag business. Definitely saw a lot of people stocking up. So while we were all laughing about toilet paper, our ag customers were also concerned that they would have the product they needed to maintain their properties, their businesses, and their livestock. So there was a huge rush on that type of product for us as well. So as we moved, many different aspects, I've got kind of a laundry list of things I would suggest, and we can share that another time. It might be easier to just create a list and send it through forward, James, if that's helpful. The things I would think you're probably already thinking about, but you would need most likely to have in place when you open up, everything from plexiglass, sneeze shields, how are you going to do curbside service maybe initially to open up, and I'm not talking just restaurants, but that might be a way for retail to open up. Signage, of course, masks, gloves, anything, shields, perhaps we have both in our stores. So I can create a separate list and share that for anybody. Maybe we could reach back to John and forward Jansel and get that if that's helpful. In the midst of this journey, we were all trying to interpret the CDC's guidelines and various governors and our president and everybody sharing different information. We formally engaged with an epidemiologist who basically was our sounding board so we could run our processes through him. And we could say, are we doing this the right way? Is there any other guidance you can provide us? And so he was very helpful to us. So it frankly built confidence for us, for ourselves, that we were doing things in the right way. And we've always tried to do this from a point of science. It's very easy to be distracted, and I'm sure you've all been in the same boat with Facebook and iHerds and all those kinds of things, and having to stop yourself and say, no, what does the science tell us? And then from a practical standpoint, how do we apply trying to work in the environment with that knowledge? So that's been the thing that, frankly, has pulled us out of some dark holes in conversations sometimes, saying, wait a minute, is that real? Is that realistic? So I would add that guidance to you, too. Right now, just very recent update, we began screening all of our associates in our Michigan, some Wisconsin stores, and our distribution center and office with a health screen. The intention is that we'll actually take temperatures as well with a no-touch thermometer, but those are impossible to come by these days. If any of you have some, let me know. We have some on order. We're hoping to have those in place next week, but we started just a checklist, 4 quick questions that we ask our associates before they can come in to work, and this has helped, again, create a sense of confidence around our associates that everyone is being screened, and so they're not working with people that have any symptoms. And it also has caught some situations where basically we've sent people home and said, look, you've got to go get checked out. You've got to get policies early on in place would be my other recommendation about how you're going to manage people who have symptoms and then later on maybe do come down with COVID-19. So you have to be in a position to know how you're going to compensate them if you're going to ask them to just take an unpaid leave, if you're going to put them on a paid leave. General policy has been out there 14 days. Not 14 working days, but 14 days. So if they're scheduled for 10 days of a 14-day shift, most of us have been paying those associates that we ask to go on a leave based on their symptoms or based on potential exposure from their families or others. So get that in place, get your mind around that, what you can afford to do so that it's clearly communicated, because it will happen and you want to be in a good position to do that. So now we're screening. Now we're adding masks. State of Michigan has put that in place as a Sunday night at midnight. You are required to wear a mask to work and also wear a mask to shop. Illinois, we expect is going this week. The governor has said that, but the executive order has not come out yet, so we're waiting to see that. But we're in position with signage and new protocols to do that. And frankly, we're going to be in a position to roll that out to all of our stores because we know, again, based on the science, if I wear a mask, I have less risk of spreading my disease, my symptoms, or I should say my potential, if I'm asymptomatic, spreading that onto you all unknowingly. So phases, just one layered on top of the other. My hope is some of those things that we've learned by the time, if you're not already open, that they'll be in place and you'll be better positioned to not trying to feel like you're being punched from day to day as you try to figure those things out. Hopefully some of this guidance will be solid for you. The rules will be in place. You'll know best practices, and you can get up and running with much more confidence in a quicker manner. So I'm not complaining. We're thrilled that we're still able to help our people. Our customers and our associates have been incredibly flexible. But it's been a challenge and a giant learning curve for us, and that will continue, I'm sure. But a lot of things I think are pretty much sort of settling in, and we're all just, as consumers, getting used to that, I think, much more quickly than we ever would have thought to. So I could talk for hours. No one wants to hear that. And John, I don't know if you want me to wait for questions at the end.
Yeah, we'll wait for questions at the end. So thank you for that excellent presentation. And yes, send us that list, and we will we'll put it out on our website and encourage people to take a look. I appreciate that sharing of information.
Of course.
Okay. Well, next we'll hear from Kristine Hillmer from the Wisconsin Restaurant Association. Just so you know, Kristine, about 20% of our members fall into the restaurant and retail category. So I don't know if 20% or more of the people on this call, we just don't know that, but you can definitely expect that there are a lot of folks in your industry listening in. So with that, I'll give you the floor.
Well, thank you, John. I very much appreciate you having me on the call so we can share what the current state of play is and so on. But before I do, I want to take a step back and just talk about the Wisconsin restaurant industry as a whole pre-crisis, and so that you have an understanding of how big of an industry this is. In Wisconsin, we have over 13,000 eating and drinking establishments. We have over almost 281,000 jobs that are restaurant and food service industry specific, and that represents a $10.7 billion estimated sales impact in the state. It's huge. And so that's pre-crisis. Now, moving forward, we have data that was collected the first week of, or the second week of April, and it really went through the first week on really kind of the impact. And it really represents a month change. Kind of going back, we know that pretty much the date that we saw the biggest change was the 11th of March, where the safer at home orders were starting, and really came down hard right before St. Patrick's Day. So it was like a light switch was flipped. And nationally, in the food service industry, 2 out of every 3 employees in our industry have lost their job. Specifically in Wisconsin, 136,000 restaurant employees have already been laid off or furloughed since the beginning of the outbreak. We also know that approximately 44% of Wisconsin operators are already temporarily closed, with an additional 40% anticipating closing further if things don't change. It's brutal. We have already seen $630 million in lost sales. If the industry continues on the path that it's going, we could see by the end of 2020 a $240 billion loss in sales. And think of the ripple effect. It's not just the restaurants. It's the local taxes. It's the state taxes. It's all the suppliers. It's the supply chain, the manufacturers. And when you also think of all these people out of work, you think that they now don't have those disposable dollars to also go out to eat. Of course, this is something that needed to happen early on. I don't think anybody can argue that this is an insidious virus. It's terrible to those who have caught it. People have died. Any comments I make from this point forward, always have that in the back of my mind. Families have been deeply affected by this virus, but they've also been deeply affected by the changes that restaurants have had to make. As many of you know, restaurants cannot have in-dining options at all. So if you're a bar or tavern that you don't have food, you're completely shut down, unless you can maybe sell a sealed bottle of wine or beer or alcohol. Restaurants have been figuring it out. The cool thing to see is the entrepreneurship, whether it's an old-fashioned kit that you make at home or curbside dining that you can take home, that you have meal kits that you can take with you. But you have to remember that when restaurants have gone to a delivery or curbside dining only, the sales that they're getting are still 50 to 75% or more than their normal sales volume. They have had to slash their staff. They have had to make changes, and they are limping by. The phrase that I've coined many times, that this is a small business extinction level event. Restaurants have a very slim profit margin. They are generally, on average, between 3 and 5%, which means for every dollar that comes in a restaurant in a normal day, 95 to 97 cents of every dollar is already spoken for in terms of food costs, overhead costs, staffing costs, etc. So when you put that in context of this crisis now, very few restaurants have any sort of a piggy bank. The profit margin was very slim. They had to overnight completely change their business model. Very few supper clubs ever did delivery, but now all of a sudden that's their only source of income. So it's been really interesting to watch it. It's been very difficult for a lot of folks. But we also know that we're in a lot of good company. Much like Jane, we are engaged at the national level with the National Restaurant Association and my counterparts all over the country, really trying to figure out what everybody's doing, borrowing ideas, trying to share best practices, and so on. We know that nationally, Georgia and Texas have started reopening, and we're watching them very closely. And we are also pivoting to trying to figure out our operators and how they can slowly reopen when they're able to. We, like Jane, we have plans in place that, and once they're done, John, I'd be happy to send them to you. We've got a product that we're putting out. It's called the Wisconsin Restaurant Promise. And it's really, as Jane mentioned, one of the things that's going to be key to reopening is that consumer confidence. We need to make sure that when things reopen, that employees are confident that they will be safe, and diners, when they can finally come in, feel that they are also safe. So that's really going to be the biggest challenge that we're going to have. And what the Restaurant Promise does is it's a document and a number of practices that restaurants can use so that they can portray that confidence that we're promising to our customers and our employees that we've got safe food practices, and then customers are also promising back to the restaurant that they are not sick when they come in. We've seen this play out in a couple of other states, and it's been very promising. We have run all of our ideas past the science experts. We've got food safety experts at a national level that have taken a look at these plans, food safety experts here in the state of Wisconsin with DATCAP, as well as public health officials. So we think that we've got a very good handle on what restaurants can do safely to reopen. We also know that when they reopen, it's going to be a slow process. Most everything that I'm seeing is, at most, when you can do in-room dining, it is going to be a 50% of capacity with social distancing and bigger gaps between tables, and so on. So we know that it's going to take a while to get back to the quote-unquote normal, but I also think you're going to see normal is never going to be the same again anytime soon. The other thing I just wanted to mention to you is federally we've heard about the EIDL loans and the PPP loans and so on. These are the PPP loans specifically for restaurants is really not a great option for them. Some are going to try to make it work, but if you consider that if you take a PPP loan, that within the next 8 weeks you have to bring at least your head count back on the same number of people, but yet you can't open, it's problematic. And even though it turns into a loan at a very low interest rate, it is adding debt to a business that is on the bubble to begin with. So it's a problematic issue we've been advocating for at the national level, that in order to make it a viable option for restaurants, we need to make some changes. That pretty much is essentially what I wanted to share with you. We have also been part of, many of you may have heard that the Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce have a back to business plan, and we have been part of that as well. We feel being part of this larger coalition of businesses and trade associations and so on, to have a data-driven strategy on how to reopen by county is going to be much more powerful than a statewide strategy, so that Iron County doesn't have to be treated the same as Milwaukee County, as an example, or Rock County the same as Dane County. I think there are some differences when it comes to some of these counties as far as demographics, the infection rate, the availability of PPP, all of the different things, that you can safely say, hey, you're in an area that doesn't have a lot of cases, that you're not demographically dense, you can slowly reopen, whereas Milwaukee County may, just because of the demographics, they may be slower to start. So we think that there's a great power in that as well. So with that, John, I'll turn it back to you, and I understand we'll probably have some questions coming.
That's right. Thank you so much, Kristine. A sobering set of comments, but sometimes we need to take a real look at our situation so that we can make smart decisions going forward. I'm going to let Dan Cunningham jump in here for a very brief update on the Better Together platform that we as an organization launched yesterday. Dan, can you speak for a little bit about that program?
Sure, I'd be honored to. Thank you, John. You know, as our speakers have said so eloquently, reopening our state is a massive challenge. You know, now more than ever, we really need clarity, communication, and confidence. Yesterday, we unveiled our Better Together framework, which is a blueprint for creating a public-private, nonpartisan task force to safely restart Wisconsin's economy. You can go to forwardjanesville.com and click on our COVID-19 resources page to view the presentation. I want to get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of it. The centerpiece for our Better Together framework is the Badger Task Force, which would be led by 3 chairs, one from the public sector, one from the private sector, and one from the healthcare sector. The task force will have 9 specific areas of focus that will really cover every aspect of the crisis, everything from our testing capacity to the availability of safe and dependable child care, and really everything in between. The task force, most importantly, will communicate progress to citizens each and every day. This transparency and communication will build confidence and trust. We think the Badger Task Force will create vibrancy by setting and achieving concrete goals and objectives. Because every win against this virus, even the small wins, will inspire confidence and propel us forward. Now, the Badger Task Force framework, or the Better Together framework, is not meant to be a replacement for plans like the Governor's Badger Bounce Back Plan or WMC's Back to Business Plan. It's really meant to be a complement to those plans. The goal of the framework is to give the state, counties, and municipalities a recovery blueprint and a leadership platform that involves the communities in the solution to this crisis. The blueprint's really available to anyone who would like to adopt it. There's no pride of authorship here. We're willing to give it to anyone who is interested. The play at this point is we've called on the governor's office to adopt and implement this framework quickly, as every day in this crisis counts. You've heard it all throughout this call. We are at a critical point at our state. We must protect the health and well-being of all citizens while avoiding an economic calamity. A recent poll found that 9 in 10 Americans are concerned about an economic collapse. Personally, I'd like to talk to the one person out of that group of 10 who's not concerned about an economic collapse, because maybe they could give me a little confidence. But in all seriousness, this is not the time for partisanship. The future of our health and economy should not be a piece on a political chessboard. Restarting our economy safely is arguably the biggest challenge we've ever faced. It is a difficult balance that will require everyone to be on the same page with common goals. Each day that passes without a cohesive, collaborative action damages our economy, our society, and really our collective psyche. Folks, we've got to get our societal mojo back, and the Better Together framework is the roadmap for getting there. So my ask of each of you today is to contact the governor's office and encourage him to implement this framework. Look for an email from us later today on instructions on how to contact the governor. Should take less than 5 minutes, be super easy, but we really want to encourage those contacts to be made. We also encourage you to share our plan on social media. Just go to Forward Janesville, like our page, and share the latest update at the top of the page on the Better Together framework. And we'd also encourage you to share this with any trade associations or industry groups that you are part of. We really want to get people talking about this plan. We really want to get together, virtually, of course, and get to the other side of this crisis. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for being so succinct, given our distinguished guest today and the number of questions that have already landed in front of me. So let's jump right into those. Here's an interesting one that is probably right for Jane, but it will be, I think, relevant to restaurants as they open. Have you trained your employees how to deal with customers who act in an unsafe manner?
Yeah, it's a great question. We continue to train, and there continues to be, what's the best way I could put it, unthoughtful customers. I would say, as is always the case, the lion's share are great, right? But we do continue to hear less now, I would say, than 2-3 weeks ago, but we do continue to hear, customers will just walk right up and they're not adhering to the 6-foot social distancing. So what we did early on was, obviously we have posters and we have statements in our stores, and we have signage all over the place, and we literally purchased buttons for the associates to wear because they didn't want to be rude, but they were also kind of frightened and shocked by the proximity some people were coming to them. So they literally have options. They can point to the button that they're wearing and say, I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm sorry, sir, you're going to need to step back. They've been trained to take 2 giant steps backwards themselves, literally hold their hand up, whatever it may be, to try to get people to pay attention. There are just people that are not paying attention. So, yes, we continue to train on that. Of course, walk away, turn your back, whatever it may be. So I'm hearing less of that because I think everybody is becoming, obviously much more aware of it. But there's always those people. So we're also trying, as I mentioned early on, we don't want to be policemen. So as we move to the world of masks, which is upon us, the thought that a retail person an associate has to confront a customer who may not have a mask on or isn't social distancing and tell them to leave or whatever, I don't want my people in that position because, frankly, I think that's scarier. That's more confrontational. So we're preparing them for that, or in Michigan and Illinois, we're already having those conversations as well. But it's tough. I mean, gosh, you hope everybody is playing by the rules, but some don't. So we're number one is you have to protect yourself. That's the message to our associates. Protect yourself, whatever that means. Step back, point to the button, walk away, whatever it is. Yep, it's a good question.
I'm sure it's on the minds of a lot of restaurant owners as they think about opening up too, and bar owners. I'm not going to leave the bars out of this as well. Kristine, I have a question here, and that is, as a restaurant owner, what resources and organizations should I be connecting to and listening to for the top source of the resources I'm going to need? Obviously, your organization is on that list, but perhaps there are some others you could suggest?
Well, I do really highly recommend our association. On our website, we have taken a great deal of time to provide resources in a number of different ways to restaurants. So right now we have 4 categories that is part of our COVID-19 part of our website. The first is resources for employers, and this is anything from asking questions about how to help their staff apply for unemployment, to what the PPP loan is, to am I allowed to do delivery of alcohol? The answer is no. Can I mix a cocktail and put it in a sealed container and sell it? The answer is no. To any questions that we are getting from operators. Let me take a step back. And one of our strategies when this crisis first hit is we completely changed our internal business model to be hyper-focused to help our members navigate these uncertain times. Everything that was not focused on that was dropped. And so we have done a call-out campaign to our operators. We have a hotline that they can call in. So we've got a great deal of resources on the website to help people navigate anything having to do with the operations. The other 3 areas are resources for employees. So you can encourage your employees to go look on there. How can they ask questions about unemployment or temporary jobs or whatever? The third is we have a list throughout the state by county on who's open for takeout or curbside delivery or delivery. And then the last one is what's good in the neighborhood. What's really always great to see in any kind of a crisis is what good things are happening. The best in people really start coming out, and we're celebrating those on the website. So those are the 4 main areas. So there is a ton of resources on there. In addition to that, we are affiliated, as you mentioned, with the National Restaurant Association, and they've come out with a reopening guidance that we have adopted that I'd be happy to share with anybody on that, as well as doing advocacy on the national level. Certainly your local health department should be also on your speed dial, so that if you have questions on reopening, if they require anything, you need to be on good terms with them on what it all means. Those are probably the best guidances I can have. Anything we have on our website is public domain, so anybody, whether you're a member or not, can access this. That was the other thing we pivoted to very, very quickly. Is right now. It is in our best interest and our members' best interest and anybody in the industry for us to be advocating on the industry as a whole, not parsing whether they're a member or not. So all of that stuff is in the public domain. The website is Wisconsin, wirestaurant.org.
That's terrific information to be sharing today. Thank you so much. The next question is kind of a big picture one for you, Jane, and that is retail was experiencing a lot of disruption prior to COVID-19, and the question is, what do you see falling out of this experience when it comes to consumer buying patterns, online shopping, and quite frankly, some brands and companies that just won't make it?
Yeah, it was in a tough state before. You're absolutely right. So this is just according to Jane, the world according to Jane, right, for whatever that's worth. Clearly there was a lot of retailers out there in tougher shape before this happened. I'll be honest with you, when I sit on these twice weekly calls and I listen to those retailers, some of those very same retailers, who have now been closed for weeks, or in the case of some who do international business, have been dealing with this for months. Their stores went down in Asia and then in Europe and then here, so they've been dealing with this months, not weeks. And to listen to their concerns, which, again, I'm very fortunate that we're not in that spot. We have our own challenges, but, clearly the big issue around rent, these retail facilities having to pay rent for buildings or, facilities that were not open, huge challenge. They haven't figured out how to find relief. Basically, the guidance, we've had Secretary Mnuchin on 2 of our calls saying, go back to your landlords and negotiate. Some landlords are saying, look, I got my own problems, so I don't care, you're going to have to pay me. Others mentioned specifically that they did shut down, but when they started to try to do some curbside or some ship-to, then the agreements with their landlords fell through because they're saying, no, in fact, you are doing business. So they've got those kinds of challenges. They have furloughed literally hundreds of thousands of associates. They all tried to support them for the first 2 weeks for the most part, which I thought was, very kind and generous. But, of course, reality stuck in. You can't continue to support 120,000 employees or 80,000 employees, some of these large retailers. So their people are gone, furloughed, with hopes to bring them back. They're not terribly optimistic that they're going to be able to bring them all back, and they're very worried, frankly, that they're going to find them. They're very concerned about those folks getting unemployment and, frankly, maybe making more money than they were even working. There's a lot of energy around, gosh, even when we're able to open, are we going to be able to find their people, and are we going to get them to come back? They're struggling with all the things that we've talked about that we're already doing. They're trying to get ahead of that. And I think overall, I can't speak for all of them, but there's been a lot of conversation, and I guess from my point of view, I think the consumers are, we're all buying what's essential. We're all buying what we need. There's not much nice to have out there, and I don't think that's just going to magically turn around when the markets do get open up again. I think we've learned to live with less. We've learned to live closer to home. Travel won't be the case for many of us, those kinds of things. I think we just have a different sentiment right now, and I don't think that's going to turn around in a hurry. Certain categories like soft lines, even for us, have been, that's pretty beaten, other than workwear or essentials or kids' clothing, because kids continue to grow, so they do still need clothing and footwear. The rest of us are doing without a lot of that. I'm hopeful that turns around, but I know the soft lines industry that we talk to, they are planning some really large hits to their even third and fourth quarter businesses. And, they've had to back off production. In some cases, their facilities have been shut down. So I see this a long pull. I'll be honest with you. I'd like to be more optimistic about that. I think there are pockets of that. I think there are things we're going to run out and say, oh my gosh, I've missed doing this, and I want to spend here or there. Whether the product will be there as we get closer to third and fourth quarter because supply chains have been disrupted, that'll be interesting to see. So I do not adhere to it's going to be a V. I think it's going to be a U at best in terms of the economy. I think it's a long pull. So we're going to be very conservative about our offerings and be very focused on the things that people have already told us that they need or that they'll need seasonally, and not get too overextended, to be honest with you. I think it's going to be another dramatic blow for many retailers out there.
That's a sobering reality, isn't it? What else?
Yeah, I'd like to say I hope I'm wrong. I'd be happy to be wrong.
Yeah, I hope you're wrong too. That dovetails with another question for Kristine, and that is, it's almost daily you hear stories about the challenges that bars and restaurants face in reopening. You mentioned the fact that some employees don't want to come back because, well, they're actually making more on unemployment than they would if they worked. I understand beer that might have been in your cooler is no longer service. You can't serve it. It's waste. You have to supply your kitchens. There's a real concern that a lot of restaurants, even when they can open and welcome guests back, just won't have the horsepower to make it through this. Is there a talk about that, Kristine, within the industry? I assume there is.
That's probably the top topic of conversation that we have on a daily basis. That, as Jane mentioned, that the sweetener on unemployment has made some people, it's more lucrative to stay on unemployment than it is to actually come back and work. And that's one of the hitches in the PPP program, that you have to bring back people to work. Well, if they refuse to come back to work, it becomes a catch-22. Additionally, you are correct that there is going to need to be dollars available to resupply their bars and their kitchen with the food and the alcohol in order to provide the services and provide the meals and drinks and so on for customers when they can do that. And with a very low profit margin, and pretty much everybody I've talked to is in the red, it's going to be extremely challenging. And again, the PPP program, if you are going to use the 25% that's not for staff, it's specifically for things like utilities and mortgage and rent. You can't use that if you want to have it forgiven for anything like food. And then you have the ripple effect of how that affects your farmers, your food suppliers, and the meat packing plants, everything. If you think about anything that supplies a restaurant, there's a huge ripple effect as well. So unless there's a change to the PPP program, those dollars are just not going to be available. And the suppliers are getting hit hard too. So it's a real challenge. And right now, unemployment, the $600 extra dollars goes through the end of July. And so if you can't bring people back, and staffing was a huge challenge even before the crisis, it's going to be even more so now. And then you also have some industries who are doing well and who have hired a lot of those staff away from the industry. So there's just some that are not even available. So it's going to be interesting to see how we navigate this. Right now, it's looking very tumultuous, to say the least.
Yeah, that is a big challenge, and this kind of dovetails into this question in front of me, which is, I'm a small business. It seems to me that my number one challenge is to give my customers confidence that they can come into my business and not worry about, leaving with COVID-19. You've talked a lot about various ideas, but if you could just give a summary of tips on promoting customer confidence. I think we all agree that is paramount in the minds of both those returning to the restaurant business and those retailers who have been closed for so long. Jane, I'll throw it to you first.
So at the risk of answering another question first, for us, honestly, we found that what's more important, what's first on our list, is making sure our associates are confident. Honestly, if we don't have the people to keep our operation running, and there have been stores where, we've lost a fair amount of people just to being at home to take care of their children or other health concerns for their family members, not so much COVID, thank God, but they've got to feel confident. And, there's a number of them. We've got over 400 that are not coming to work right now. They're on their own accord, their leave, because they're not feeling safe for whatever reason in the workplace. So we literally communicate daily on what are all the things, because some of these folks may have been gone 2-3 weeks, and a lot of these things have come in the last 2-3 weeks. So we've made a concerted effort to say, these are all the things we've done since you were here. This is how we're operating. Just to try to get them to consider we are happily in the last few days having more people coming back. Now, whether it's just that they've been gone for a while and they frankly need the income, or they're starting to build a little more confidence as they're out and about, or they're appreciating our communications. It's probably a little bit of everything. But first, you got to have an associates show up and feel like they're comfortable. Then I think all the things we talked about earlier as far as the physical things you can do to your facility. I mean, not just obviously disinfecting and cleaning, seeing real protocol around that, good signage to try to guide people appropriately, the social distancing, 6-foot markers on the floors and in checkout lanes, and the plexiglass at checkout lanes or service counters, and those kinds of things where you can walk in and you can visibly see that at least in my case, retail's facility is well prepared to keep people spaced out and they're making a conscious effort, I think, and again, like I spoke to earlier, if we're all consistently doing those same things, it just makes it easier for us as humans, I think, to say, okay, I understand what the rules are now. I understand everywhere I go it should look something like this. That's why I'm just an advocate of sharing these things across all avenues where the public is just learning. And if it starts to feel, consistent, that we'll start to be more comfortable. But again, I would just put the emphasis on get your associates ready. They've got to feel confident first. You've got to get them on board. They've got to exude confidence when customers come in. We talk about it. You're coming to my house. These are the rules in my house. Like, I'm just going to be obvious about it, right? This is how you act in my house, and these are our rules. And we're happy to have you. You're an invited guest, but this is the way that we'll keep each other safe. And be, just be adamant about that. So it starts with your associates, but then I think being very visual and specific about protocol, signage, messaging, having your associates help tell the story, live the story. That's the best way. Then people will start to see, okay, they're doing it consistently. They're doing it for my benefit, and they're doing it for their own benefit. We can do this together.
Kristine, do you have a brief nugget on building customer confidence?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we're working on this Wisconsin Restaurant Promise. It's almost done, and I'll share it with you that it really is all about what are the practices that you are putting in place in order to build that confidence, and not just in reality, but in just the impression that you're giving out. And I will echo the same thing that Jane just mentioned, that it starts with your employees or your associates. And do they feel safe? And are they practicing safe things within what they are doing in your restaurant? In our case, that is going to go a huge way. Other things more specifically for restaurants that you can do on top of it is making sure you have hand sanitizer as they walk in and walk out, that all place settings, utensils, menus, condiments, anything is either a single use or is cleaned and sanitized after every use. And what that means is people see it. So you have either single packets of ketchup or single packets of salt on the tables, or if they're going to be on the table, have people visually see you actually practicing what you're preaching. The tables, chairs, condiments, everything is clean and sanitized between everybody. That masks are probably going to be the norm for a long time. In our world, gloves are actually controversial, especially when you're talking food safety, that unless the gloves are being changed between every single solitary customer, it actually probably is not a good practice to use. And it puts restaurants in an uncomfortable situation because, of course, Facebook and social media tell you, well, everybody should be wearing gloves, but we know that gloves sometimes causes you to not wash your hands or sanitize your hands as much as possible because there's that false sense of security. The better option is to use hand sanitizer or wash your hands constantly. But it's the visual seeing of it happening that I think is going to be one of the things that customers are going to really need to see in order to feel confident that what you're doing, they're practicing what you're preaching. I think you also, in indoor and outdoor seating options, you have to have that purpose of social distancing. If you have booths, okay, maybe you close off one with tape so that you know that there is distance between groups of people. I think you're going to see a lot of that kind of social distancing and closing off areas and so on, so that people can't sit there or people can't be as close as they want, or there's plexiglass between the booths or between you and the cashier or whatever those certain circumstances is. I think individual operators are going to have to really carefully look at their operations and find out what is in the best interest of their staff and their business. And then one final thing, we're also recommending that on staff, you visually have somebody that is designated their safety manager or their cleanliness manager, however you want to put it, so that they are monitoring and making sure staff are doing the correct things, that if a customer has a question, they can go to that person and say, what are you doing in this instance? How are you keeping me safe? So that they can be articulate in saying, these are all the steps that we're taking in our business.
That's really insightful. Thank you. I hadn't even gone down to what it's going to be like to walk into a restaurant again, but you just gave me a vision of that. Just so you know, there is a company here in town named Print Corporation, and they are now producing 1 million face shields per week. They have ramped up production. There will no longer be a shortage of face shields in the state of Wisconsin, just so you know. That's one thing we can
John,
check off the list.
I was going to say a plug from us. Those are the shields we have.
Good. And I was talking to Joe Prejeant yesterday, and he said they're getting their e-commerce site up and operating efficiently, so it won't be long, and that will be available. Even in small lots, for those of you who are listening wondering, do I have to buy 5,000? No, you don't. And so that'll be part of what we're trying to do with our survey that we sent out this last week. You'll have another chance to open it up tomorrow or Thursday when we send out our pulse. It's basically a real short survey on personal protective equipment. This is one area we think we can help our members. Dan, any last comments about the Better Together platform, what you're looking for our members to help you with?
Yeah, thank you. Again, I'll be sending out an email to the entire membership today about ways to contact the governor, and I would encourage people to do that. We're going to make it as easy as possible, and really wanting the governor to take a look at this strategy, because we think it makes a lot of sense. And, I think that this has been tough. This is obviously a crisis that is among the biggest we've ever faced in our lifetimes, and I think that this framework and strategy is a great way to, like I said before, to get our societal mojo back. So I really hope that people will take the time to contact the governor, and and I would also say in your daily lives, try to find some positive things that are going on. I think this crisis has created some unlikely heroes, our medical professionals, obviously, but grocery workers, our friends, neighbors, our kids. I mean, I was in Festival Foods the other day, and I really sincerely thanked the clerk for being there, and she actually teared up a little bit, and it was a really special moment. I encourage everybody to find those moments in their lives and try to find some positivity in this. We will weather this crisis, and we're going to do it together, and Forward Zanesville will be there to help.
Thank you, Dan. Before we run out of time, I want to say that I'm involved in the Rock County Emergency Small Business Fund. This is the Rock County fund that was set up to help $1 million fund for 1% low-interest loans with a grace period for payback. It's set up to help our smallest businesses. They're still taking applications. We meet for the first time this afternoon to look at the first tranche of applicants, but I'm told there's still capacity there, so if you're listening and wondering, it's the first link on the email that we sent you this morning at the very end, if you want to evaluate whether or not that is something you could possibly take advantage of. We also are working with the city to distribute posters that the city of Janesville produced called Safer Shopping Tips. They're real brief 4 points about staying home when you're sick, wearing a cloth mask, and the obvious things. But we have a significant number of those posters. If anybody listening would like them, we will deliver them to your door. So just let us know that you want those. And thanks again for city of being so proactive and trying to protect the citizens here. Well, we've run out of time. I want to thank Kristine and Jane for joining us again today and providing such insight into retail and the restaurant business. It is hard to think about so many businesses struggling the way they are and probably will for the foreseeable future. But as Dan just said, we're going to do everything we can to help, and we know that information is where you start to try to find a way to work our way through this, and we're here for you, and just give us a call if there's anything we can do to help. So with that, I'll close today's conference call, and I hope you'll join us next week. And I was going to say have a good day. I would say have a safe day. Thank you.
Thank you.